I am Dr. David Croto, and I'm here with Dr. Ben Noonan to talk about Hebrew. So, Dr. Noonan, tell me, why should Christians study Hebrew?
Well, a lot of Christians are intimidated by the biblical languages, and they think that having a translation is good enough. And certainly when it comes to the gospel and the basics of our faith, I would say definitely it's enough. But you miss out on nuances in the biblical text if you're not reading it in the original languages. So a good image or a good picture that I like to use for this is The Wizard of Oz. The moment when Dorothy steps into Oz and everything changes into color. And that's what it's like reading the Bible in its original languages. You get that depth, that color, instead of just reading it in a black and white translation. And there are also some instances, too, where even knowing the biblical languages are going to prevent you from having some misunderstandings of the biblical text. And so these are great reasons, I think, for studying Hebrew. They're the reasons why I myself first wanted to study Hebrew and did, and why I love teaching Hebrew here at CIU.
So what are some examples then from the Old Testament about how when you know Hebrew, it'll help you understand the text better?
Okay. Well, a good example of where we can get some extra nuance comes from Genesis 3, verses 8 and 10. And so this is in the aftermath of the fall. Adam and Eve have just eaten from the fruit, and it talks about how they hid themselves. And that's the way that the narrator puts it in 3:8. And he uses a particular verbal form there, and I won't go into all the details, it's not necessary, but he uses a form that's reflexive. And so this just means that the subject, Adam and Eve, are doing an action, in this case hiding, to themselves. It's affecting themselves. They're actively participating. But when you take a look at Adam's response in 3:10, which is when God asks him, okay, what have you been doing? He uses a different verbal form. And it's really hard to capture it in English because we don't really have a form that does this. But he essentially says, I was hidden. He takes himself out of the picture. It doesn't say, I did anything. It's just this happened. And a lot of English translations obscure this, which is kind of unfortunate because it adds some nuance. And really what it's doing is it's showing us how Adam is refusing, even in his response to God there, when he says that he was hidden, he's refusing to acknowledge what happened. And at least for me, it makes me think of Aaron's response when Moses asks him, okay, what happened with this golden calf? And he said, oh, I don't know. I just put this gold in, and it's like, poof, this calf came out. And so it just gives us this added nuance as far as the depths of sin, the extent to which sin has spread, helps us to better appreciate the narrative in that way.
So it's kind of a lack of taking responsibility for his actions, and kind of maybe even a little bit of blame shifting because someone else must be responsible for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. And any other examples from the...
So another one that I would say maybe even corrects a misunderstanding, or at least a common misinterpretation, has to do with Proverbs 22:6. Which a lot of Christians take this verse as a promise, where if a parent trains up their children in the ways of God, then when that child has grown up, they're not going to depart from that. But that's not really what the Hebrew says, and we see this in two different ways. The first thing is that the verb that's typically translated as to train up doesn't actually have to do with teaching or encouraging or anything like that. It actually means to dedicate, somebody that's set aside for a particular purpose. And so elsewhere in the Bible, it's used to talk about the dedication of a temple or a house or something like that. The other thing here that's important is what's usually translated as the way he should go is not actually, it doesn't say that. It just says his way. And it refers to the way that somebody actually goes. Not the way that somebody could go, but the way that actually somebody goes, their natural way of things. That's how it's used all throughout Proverbs. And so it makes sense to take it that way here. And when you put this all together then, this isn't a promise that if you train up somebody in the ways of God, they're going to stick to that when they get older. Instead, it's saying that it's like an ironic command. Just let a child do what they want. Give them over to their own way. If they do that, when they become an adult, they're not going to have had any discipline, and they're just going to do what they what they knew to do when they were a kid. And so it still encourages us to discipline kids, but not quite in the same way that people usually think it does.
Interesting. Furthermore, Proverbs aren't necessarily promises either.
Exactly.
There's a
That's
genre
another big
issue
thing.
going on there.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Thank you so much for explaining to us why Hebrew is an important thing for Christians to learn.